on here today. Those of you in the audience, this is a time when we really would like you to give us some topics you might want us to talk about. I always have some topics that I will talk about, and today I've even got way more of those. I could fill up 10 hours today worth of things. But if you wouldn't mind, put your comments in the chat box and your topics and different things you might like to talk about, and we can discuss those. Mark's on the line with me from Bangladesh, and Mark's been having some internet problems. He's muted right now, which he normally does for himself. And again, most of you don't probably realize this. We don't talk about it a lot, but we stream this webinar live out to more than just the membership site that we have, which is what you probably have gotten an email from, which is our EAT community site. And that's hosted by a company called Kajabi. And you guys have seen us inside that site working on some things. And one of those topics that we could spend a lot of time on today that we're in the middle of working on is a dog services and products related site for dog owners, fanciers, lovers, and again, don't necessarily have to own a dog yourself. You could just, like I say, be somebody who has an interest and enjoys them, and you could be a part of what we're going to be doing. And because we're going to have a whole site that we're actually coming up with a name for right now. It's probably going to be K9 with a K and the letter and the number 9, which is an abbreviation of what the word that's used for dogs a number of times. They're canines. And again, canine would be the word used to describe their specific genus, Canis, which, and then people have used it in a slang in the English language and call it canine, Canine. But it's also shortened a lot of times to just the letter K and the number 9. And we have acquired the domain names for Canine Hub. So we're going to call it the Canine Hub. And inside that, we're going to do a number of different products and services, including all the way up to an auction, which is what Mark's been working a lot on, that we will be doing for that. Now, you're probably saying, well, why is that economic? You might argue maybe it's not, but I think it is, because remember, the definition of economics is doing something to make some money making the planet better. And there's pretty good evidence that since man's been around, at least dogs have been around. And there are many people and many different times in history, going way back in written history, that will call dogs man's best friend. And so the domestication of wolves or coyotes or any number of different types of canine species have led to the domesticated dog. And domesticated dogs range from Mark, and I don't know if the intent was to have your name just be a big part of what we see on the screen, but that's what I'm seeing. Should either probably just be my picture in the short run or not just your name being there. So there we go. We'll go to some sharing some screens here in just a little bit, but we just wanted to get started here for a second. welcome again to our guests. And you'll see that in the chat, people will put in a lot of things, and there'll be those that are articles that people have read over the last week. There'll be, or a different period of time. They'll be just broad. I'm not going to just describe something that somebody writes in as something in the chat. But I'll deal with questions if I think I can answer them. That last one, no way I can answer, Alicia. I am not a plant expert in any means. And so to say, is it too late to plant cover crops? First place, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, it would be probably potentially too early. So again, that's a question that on a worldwide basis is not necessarily very appropriate. So it's hard to answer, and it's a broad question. So again, you guys are free and as attendees to read the chat. I will deal with specific questions that people have. And even if people want to raise their hands, and you can do that, meaning on the site, we can unmute you and let you speak also. I have some topics that I want to cover today. And one of them is one that's been a passion for a long period of time, which is I personally have a bias towards growing edible food in water, which is called aquaculture. And aquaculture is, especially in the Western Hemisphere, so North America, South America, Central America, it is not used as a very dominant or prominent, or even in some cases, a portion of agriculture. In history, the Mexicans, the natives that lived especially in the tropical areas of Mexico, did use aquaculture as a food production source in a big way. And they grew plants in water where the roots were in the water, and the upper portions of the plants were growing terrestrially. So they were plants that could grow well in a situation like that, which, by the way, most of our domesticated crops fit that category. Even, for example, corn, which would be very poor choice in an aquatic system because it really isn't that productive. But if you were to grow corn in the upper portions growing up in the air, the roots going down into some kind of a media, gravel, sand, composting sort of a mixture, and then water, corn would do very well. There are better plants to grow in water-based types of systems, which, by the way, notice I didn't use the word aquaponics yet. That is a more modern term that is often used to describe growing fish and plants, terrestrial plants, in aquatic systems and having a balanced ecosystem. Those of you who have listened to me for very long know I strongly believe, from a science perspective, that's not possible. Meaning you cannot have a balanced system of aquatic animals, fish being maybe the dominant visible species, but could be bacteria and all the other microscopic sorts of things, could be crustaceans, mollusks. You can't grow those in a system where plants are that you're growing that are terrestrial, but they're being grown in a media. So that would be beans, peas, lettuce, basil, corn, that I mentioned earlier, and have those plants grow optimally, because fish, mollusks, crustaceans, all those aquatic animals, and even the aquatic algae, which would be the plants that might be growing also in that system, they wouldn't produce enough of 3 different nutrients that those plants would need to grow: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and even potentially a number of others. But there is no way they would produce enough potassium or phosphorus. They could produce enough nitrogen in some cases, maybe even extreme amounts of nitrogen, but not the others. So you would have to supplement, or else you could have a system that'll work temporarily, maybe even for a whole season or a portion of a season, but to have it be a system that would work on a year-round basis for food production is not possible. You have to add additional nutrients to get the growth that would be anywhere similar to what you get in a terrestrial type of a system. However, if you ecologically utilize ponds, natural water systems, and do not try to completely optimize the amount of aquatic plants that are grown, or even terrestrial plants grown in an aquaponic type setting, to where their roots are growing into a media, the plants are growing on floating tubes, let's say, or floating pads that are in the water of the pond. If you were to just use the number of ponds in the United States that are an acre in size or more to do that kind of aquatic farming, you could produce enough food right now to feed the world. Let me say that again. If you just used the number of ponds in the United States, forget about the rest of the world, in the United States that are an acre or more in size, in an aquaculture, ecologically balanced manner, you could produce enough food to feed the world today. We don't do it. The only place in the world where aquaculture is really being practiced at a level that's of any significance is where it's done completely artificially. It's not done in anywhere close to a natural sort of manner in the way I'm describing. Instead, it's horribly polluting. It's growing. Shrimp is one of the primary species. Other kinds of aquatic animals also could be mollusks, could be fish to a certain extent, in very intense situations, usually in coastal waters near the coast, where the waters have some amount of salinity in them. And they're creating so much pollution that off the shore of Asian countries where this kind of aquaculture is occurring, there's so much pollution that you can see it in images that are taken from drones or satellites or any kind of aerial photography or aerial videography. That's not what I'm talking about in terms of aquaculture. I'm talking about something that's much more natural. We all know that if we practiced agriculture also in that way, rather than in the intense way that we do it in North America and Europe and some parts of Asia and South America, also Australia, with fertilizers, and huge amounts of water, usually that are brought in potentially from other locations, where we're depleting natural resources in a horrible sort of way. We wouldn't be able to produce enough food to produce to feed any kind of a population base. Instead, we have to do it in these intense sort of ways that are destroying resources. They're not economic in any way. Mark, make sure, because I'm not really watching the specifics of the chat, to let me know if there are questions that come through here. And I think I might have seen one. No, this is just a comment, a really, really long one. Paresh, is there a question there, or are you just wanting to put a comment in to let other people be able to read? I don't see a question. All right. So again, that's a topic we're going to spend more time on. I'm going to start writing some ebooks about that topic. I've reached the point in my life at 73 years old where I wished I didn't have to say this, but there's probably a lot less time that I'm going to have left to do things here on this earth than there is time that I've already either spent well or I've wasted. So I want to be able to do things that I know that I have the skill set to make some impact with. And I have done what I just described at Mountain Sky Ranch and set up systems for other people all around the world to grow in small ponds or small water bodies in a natural, ecologically balanced sort of way, to where you don't just grow food, but you also enjoy those water sources for recreation, swimming, fishing, boating, kayaking, you name it, lots of other different things, diving, jumping off of a swing, or you name it. Just enjoy the beauty of them in other ways and in other cases. But I guess I do see a question here from Alicia. Tilapia, catfish, shrimp, or carp, what are the optimum species to raise in that group? Again, I don't really want to throw stones, Alicia, but that's not a very good question. Because the answer is that it's different. In a certain place, tilapia would be wonderful. Tilapia have certain characteristics where they will grow best at about 75 degrees. And when the water temperature gets above that, they'll still survive. They won't die. But if the water temperature gets above it, they actually will be stunted and won't grow as well. If the water temperature is like it is in most of North America, where for most of the year it's less than 75. As a matter of fact, for some of the years, it's just barely above freezing. Tilapia will die. Tilapia can't tolerate temperatures below about 55 to 60 degrees for even a very short period of time. So in North America, tilapia have to be grown either in southern climates, in southern areas, and even there's a risk that they could be killed because of elevated temperatures. That's why they're not native to North America at all. Tilapia is not a native fish in any way to North America. Catfish are native to North America. Catfish will survive in temperatures that go all the way down to just above freezing, and they'll survive in elevated temperatures up to as much as 80 or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Their optimal temperature range is a little lower than what tilapia would be, probably in the 65 to 70 degree range, maybe even a little lower. And they can be good. They're not going to be as good in tropical areas where temperatures are elevated above that. Will they grow there? Yeah, but they'll be suboptimal. Shrimp are way more temperature constrained. In first place, shrimp is a very broad term. There are hundreds of different species of organisms that are called shrimp at various different places in the world. And what is called a shrimp in Africa is not something we would ever call a shrimp here in the United States. So that word is used to describe a much broader range of different kinds of organisms. And there are certain species that do well in certain temperature ranges and certain ones that don't. Carp are very temperature resistant and can grow in a wide array of temperatures. They also are a little more tropical. They'll grow faster in warmer temperature water, but they will actually do really well in an over wintering situation when water temperatures get very cold. A goldfish is a carp. All right. Carp is also a very broad name of a whole group of different species that are in a family, even not just even a genus, that is the broadest family of fish in the world. So to use the word carp, you're almost always talking about some wide range and wide variety. So the right answer to that question is that there is an optimal species for a given ecological situation. Where literally one body of water 5 miles away from another one may not have the same optimal fish that would grow in it. Certainly something in a northern United States, northern North America, or up into Canada is not going to be the same kind of a species that's optimal in Florida or Southern California or Southern Texas, Louisiana, and so on. So very, very broad array of different kinds of questions. So again, is there any other questions in here, Mark, that I'm missing?
I think we covered everything question-wise.
There's a question here about any thoughts about polyculture and integrated systems. Yeah, very strong ones. Anything that's mono-specific species-wise is not something that is going to be useful in the wild. It's not going to work. Is it going to work in aquaculture? Monoculture is what we've tried to do in agriculture since the Industrial Revolution, at least, and in many cases much earlier than that. And I think we're showing that that's failing pretty badly. So it's probably a good idea to think that the systems that are going to be sustainable and regenerative, making things better over time, are those that are a little more diverse in the kinds of species that are involved in them. So a polyculture, if that's the word that we want to use, is going to have more applicability than a monoculture system. What's the difference between aquaponics and aquaculture? Aquaculture is growing organisms in water. Agriculture is growing things anywhere. It's the growth of organisms to feed something, people, other animals, and so on. That's broadly. We don't use a more specific word for soil-based, land-based growing organisms. So we don't say agriculture. Agriculture is a broader word. So most people, when they use it, if they say agriculture, they're not talking about growing things in water, but it, as broadly, it is intended to be a word that would be including growing things in water. Aquaculture is very specific. It's intended to say growing things, culturing. The word culture means growth. So growing things in water. Agra is not intended to be terrestrial. or land-based, but it's usually spoken about that way. So most people, when they describe the word agriculture, they're talking about land-based culture or farming.
Biodiversity is the key in thoughts.
Biodiversity is, yes, is a strong key for long term, for sustainable or regenerative types of farming. People have been growing things in monocultures since written history, at least, has been out there. And certain places where that's occurred have had soils that have become so depleted in their natural nutrients that that's what has led to using fertilizers. Fertilizer is an artificial nutrient source for agriculture, whether it be in water or whether it be on land. There are native or natural fertilizers that are created over time in a native natural community. Unfortunately, when we go to monoculture type systems, we use up more of those nutrients than are available. So we have to add secondary fertilizers from outside sources. And what's happened over the last 100 years or more now, probably 150 years, the Industrial Revolution was in the 1870s, is that we've started to create man-made fertilizers from various sources, many of them dangerous sources, and we've created even contamination, pollution, which is negative for anybody or any organism that were to eat those plants. And yet we don't even know it. It's very likely that if you were to measure the amount of heavy metals, lead, silver, cadmium, arsenic, any number of the metals, if you were to be measuring them in most meat, whether it be avian, chickens, turkeys, you name it, aquatic, fish, terrestrial, hogs, turkeys, chickens, those are avian, excuse me, hogs, sheep, cattle. If we measure those levels of those toxic heavy metals, most consumption of those types of foods in the world would have elevated levels above what people should be eating. We don't measure those things. A pet peeve of mine, some of you have heard, I haven't said this one in a while. Next time you buy bottled water anywhere, look in the label, see if it tells you what's in it. People comment, when was the last time you looked at a label on bottled water? Do it. And when you do it, tell me what you see. Does it tell you what the levels of metals are? Does it tell you what the levels of other nutrients are? Nope. It'll stay distilled, purified, whatever. There's no requirement, at least in the United States, to describe what the actual potential contamination of that water is. No requirement. So people don't do it. Even though it probably tastes better, you're probably better off drinking water from a tap in Flint, Michigan, because they're now monitoring the lead levels and a whole bunch of other heavy metals and other things that could be in that water when that's not occurring with bottled water. Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola, for their bottled waters, Desante is one, Aquafina is the other. Desante is Coke's, Aquafina is Pepsi's, are not required to have any analysis. Does that seem right? I don't know. Doesn't to me. Coke and Pepsi probably don't like me very much. Anyway, what else here?
Yeah, Robert has a question. He says, I've seen prawn from Thailand, urban markets, a huge one too. Might make a good meal. So what kind of,
Yeah, they're huge. There can be very large, and prawns are, again, one of those species that in the US, people wouldn't know the difference between a prawn and a marine shrimp. But they're in that family. And there are freshwater prawns that will grow in more tropical areas like Thailand that won't grow here in the United States. They just take warmer temperature. Temperature variability. Temperature is the single most important environmental variable that will affect growth or even survivability of any edible organism. Temperature. Thus, one of those controversial topics, global warming. And more importantly, human impact on air temperatures. So let's not use the word warming. Global temperatures are most impacted by what? Some would argue that they're most impacted by carbon dioxide. Some would argue they're most impacted by water vapor. Some would say sulfur levels. That's a very controversial topic in the whole discussion of air temperatures in the world, as is generally the whole topic, and you probably in this group, you don't want to hear this, of just global warming generally. Because in the mid-1980s, 30 years ago, you would not have heard a group of scientists talk about global warming at all. As a matter of fact, headline articles in international journals, scientific journals, popular press, Newsweek magazine, Time magazine, New York Times, you name it, would have said, what are we going to do about the horrible level of global cooling that's going on? I'm old enough to remember those days. Those were my days as a young scientist, younger. I was even still in my 30s by that point, but I had a lot of education in the environmental area. And the biggest fear was that we were going back into an ice age or something, and that there was all kinds of activities that were creating global cooling in a huge level. Today, there's a whole opposite feeling, and that is that we have the fear of global warming. At least a lot of people do. And it's one of those topics that there's probably a larger number today that worry about the whole topic of global warming, and not very many that worry about global cooling. Maybe we should just be worried about both of them, and maybe we should be more worried about the use of things like artificial fertilizers and artificial pesticides and herbicides, where there's really no argument that they are creating problems, and yet we still continue to use them. We use them more and more, as a matter of fact. the amount of fertilizers used in the world grow at a rate that greatly exceeds the rate of additional food production that's occurring. So if food production is increasing at something like 5% annually, that maybe is about the amount that's needed to keep up with the population that's increasing. The amount of fertilizer produced is probably double that. The amount of pesticides and herbicides that are produced is probably also greatly exceeds that. I haven't seen those specific statistics, but instead we focus so much on warming when what we really ought to be focusing on is how dangerous is what we're doing with fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides. And you could broadly use the word pesticide to indicate something that's killing animals and plants and microbes and you name it. Because that's what the goal is it's a murdering element. It's something that's used to murder different kinds of organisms. That's what a pesticide is. It's a murderer at a given level. So again, a question, what kinds of nutritious foods can be raised for freshwater prawn diets? Anything that doesn't have fertilizers or pesticides in it, Robert. That's not completely true. Prawns are carnivores mainly, so they really need to be fed mostly an animal-based type of a food. That's not a generality. There are certainly herbivorous prawns also, but not the ones that are oftentimes that'll grow as large as the ones that you're talking about. So the best feed for aquaculture grown prawn, a monoculture grown prawn, which I don't recommend, would be something meat based. Why not just grow them, however, and don't worry about whether they're prawns that are growing or what they are, but just grow them naturally in a pond, harvest whatever is there, and eat that, and harvest it in a balanced manner to where from year to year to year to year, the system stays balanced. That's what I would recommend. Can most prawn diets be accomplished with black soldier fly? They could, yeah. And where are you going to get the black soldier flies? Do you know how to grow them? And I say that not jokingly, because most people will love that concept, but tell me what the culture process for the black soldier fly is. I know it. I've done it. It's not something that I'd want to try. It's way too labor intensive. That's the other negative of most traditional forms of agriculture. They're highly labor intensive. Now, we've moved most of our labor now to equipment, to mechanized forms of labor. And with AI, we're probably going to move more and more of it to that. And I'm not going to render an opinion about whether that's good, bad, or indifferent right now. I have my own opinions about that, but that's going to happen more and more with time. Farming is going to become more and more mechanized and more robotic, meaning humans will be writing code, writing programs, and having less and less direct involvement with it if we continue to do monoculture like we're seeing done for most kinds of still farming that's occurring in the world. We'd love to hope that farming would be the regenerative and sustainable and green type that that I hope that I'm an advocate of, but it's not going to. I mean, that's a pipe dream. That's just not something that's really going to likely happen. It's not. In my 50 years, there are less people per capita doing it today than there were 50 years ago. My adult sort of life of now more than 50 years. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. The numbers of people that go to regenerative and organic types of conferences and give papers and do scientific study has not grown in 50 years. That's scary, but it's true. It's what the reality is. And yet agriculture in the more common industrialized fashion continues to grow actually more rapidly. There's no reason that with that form of agriculture that anyone in the world should not have food on their table today. Food shortages anywhere in the world have to do with distribution and not anything to do with food production. There's plenty of food grown out there in the world. It's just not properly distributed to where there are people starving because they don't have that distribution to get the food to them. So anyway, that's a little bit of a rant there.
Yeah, there's a question about PFAS. Any thoughts?
And the question is it here in the lower end of the questions? Trying to get to it.
Yeah, it's the last one.
Yeah, I see that. Controversial one. You're not going to like my answer, probably anybody that's going to be listening to this one. Again, because I've been around the environmental contamination world for over 55 years, really. I was doing college level work when I was 15. So 55 years. I'm 73, so a long time. Again, in the Western cultures of the world, I've seen a wide number of environmental contaminants that we have gotten very concerned about and then lost our concern about them. And I've seen some others that we got very concerned about and we continue to stay concerned about, and others that we've never been concerned about. PFAS is one of those that we never even knew and never even heard of. I did, but the vast majority of people didn't until 5 years ago. It was not considered and even thought about. It is, a lot of people call it the forever chemical because it's very persistent. It doesn't degrade very quickly. And it's used in so many different manners. The chemicals that break down to become PFASs. So it's used in Teflon, that is used as fireproofing, or even as a base for most kinds of clothing. Teflon is just a generic name of a broad artificial chemical that's created by man. It's used in fire retardants and was historically used in a huge way. It was used in de-icing until just 5 years ago. Every de-icing activity that would occur on the leading edges of wings of planes in the world was done with chemicals that were huge contamination levels of PFAS in them. Yeah, we didn't care about it. We cared about some other things. So who knows where PFAS is going to go, and is it horrible? I think the verdict is still not in about whether the impact of certain levels of PFAS on humans creates disease or creates health challenges. I don't think there's been enough science yet that would that would say that definitively it causes whatever. So now let's go to the other end of the spectrum. If PFAS is relatively new in our understanding of it and our worries about it as a contaminant, let's go to one that pretty early in my career as a scientist 55 years ago was beginning to become a concern and something that we worried about, and that's asbestos. And asbestos is a fiber. It's a natural fiber. It's found in a number of different kinds of natural stone at very low levels. And what humans determined 100 years ago probably is that if you extracted it, pulled the fibers out of the natural rock it was in, concentrated them, put them together, you could make a material that had a number of really man-related positives. High insulative value, really high insulation value, a high fire retardant value, a very high sustainability, meaning it would not degrade. So asbestos is still used. People don't realize this, but in brake pads, in certain kinds of vehicles, and because it's got a huge ability to, once it's molded together, to withstand high temperatures, ridiculously high temperatures, and lots of friction and all kinds of other effects that occur in moving vehicles that have to come to stops, for example, which is what brakes would do. Asbestos became the most publicized, the most studied environmental contaminant in the world because of the fact that there are two diseases, asbestosis. It's called that because of what causes it, and mesothelioma, which is a form of cancer, that are only caused by exposure to asbestos. Let me state that once more. The only way you can get mesothelioma, the only way you can get asbestosis is from exposure to asbestos fibers at some amount. You can't get it, either one of those diseases, from anything else. Well, what did that make asbestos as a contaminant then? What did it do in our society? See if anybody gets it, Mark. See if somebody puts in the chat. What makes asbestos unique as a contaminant because of the fact that there are two diseases that are only caused by it? You have to have exposure to asbestos to get asbestosis or mesothelioma. Anybody putting anything in, Mark? I'm not seeing anything.
No, I don't see.
Okay. Yeah. Do you know? I've said this before. What is unique about asbestos as a contaminant?
So when you get diagnosed with any of these diseases, you can get compensation from what
You're getting it, okay?
Yes.
Keep going with that.
With lawsuits and stuff.
Yeah, we're in a very litigatory world, meaning that if somebody can make a buck because of someone else's problem, that's called litigation, lawsuits. lawyers around the world made their careers based on suing companies that produced asbestos fibers. Because if you had a client that had asbestosis, you could just start suing anybody and everybody who ever could have potentially had asbestos that you were then exposed to, and you could likely win. The science justified you being able to win. There's no other contaminant in the world that right now we know of where you can absolutely know that if you get a certain disease, that it's caused by a very specific environmental source, asbestos in this case. You get cancer and you believe that it came because you were drinking contaminated water or you were eating contaminated foods from whatever, that's arguable. Yeah, maybe likely you were, but you could argue pretty strongly that it was something else that caused that. It was because your mother raised you some certain way, or you were abused as a kid. I mean, you name the different things. Or you could say, you know what, you can't tell us that this water that this person drank caused them to get cancer, because they drank water from all over the world. And who knows which of those waters that they drank was what really caused them to get the disease, which is why Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola really don't care whether there's any contamination data on their bottles or their bottled water, because they know they don't have to worry about getting sued from it. Nobody's going to claim their bottled water caused them to get cancer, because there's so many potential sources for cancer. There's so many different sources for heart failure. There's so many different sources for kidney failure. There's so many different sources for liver failure. There's so many different, in all of these. The one environmental factor that became the most studied, the most removed in the world has been asbestos. And a whole industry developed around the management of asbestos. Whole industries have developed around the management of pesticides and herbicides damage also, but nothing like the asbestos world that was debated from a legal perspective.
Yeah, and in our part of the world, arsenic is a big problem. Lead also. Old pipes, they contain lead.
Mhm.
So
Well, they do still in a lot of places in the United States, and where some of our larger, more recent environmental catastrophes have occurred are related to lead in pipes, and lead which then would go from those pipes into drinking water. But even that becomes a difficult lawsuit circumstance because lead's everywhere. If I was a defense attorney and defending a company that was being sued because they claimed that my company's product was creating lead poisoning, I would point to a whole bunch of other things and say, my product didn't cause it. It was this product over there. Why don't you go sue them? Well, that creates a little bit of a problem if you're in a litigation mode, which creates a whole industry, because what it means is the best attorney and those who can afford to pay the best attorneys are the ones that win. So we're in a very litigious, litigation oriented world right now, and because of that, we're causing tremendous, I think, health challenges for a lot of people, because it's hard to win a suit when it's related to that. And you're part of the world, you're just talking about it, Mark. Nobody's going to think about suing the city of Dhaka because all of their pipes are lead, right? So
good luck with that. Yeah.
yeah. Good luck with getting any value or anything out of that process. So anyway, what else here? what a great group of topics today, everybody. The other big concern somebody said is a question mark is glyphosate, and you just did a little bit of misspelling in there, but glycophosphate, it should say. They're missing a C and an O, or Roundup, which is the same thing. I'm horrible. It's a horrible chemical. It's killed millions of people probably. Is there any justification for it from an environmental, an ecological, a health perspective? No. Is there from a general agriculture perspective? And why do most people in the world could care less about it? Because it probably isn't just affecting. It's really hard to know if you get cancer. Did it come because you were using Roundup all the time? Well, it could be. I think it's very likely it could. Could you ever prove it? No, you couldn't. So, Roundup's made by Monsanto and now Bayer, and Chinese companies that don't even care. It's not called Roundup, but it's a horrid material. Can it be used safely? Probably, but hardly anybody's doing it. And if you spray it into the air, it's not going to stay right where you sprayed it. It's going to go somewhere else. So that's a whole, that's not just a topic. That's a lifetime of potential discussion and issues related to it. So let's see, a couple minutes left.
Yeah, next week we have Hugh Goebel coming up. Yeah.
If Hugh Goebel, it's coming back. Hugh's done another session with us, 7 different sessions before. Hugh is from South Africa. He's going to come back and I'll be interviewing him and we'll get an update for where he's at. We're going to turn his 7 sessions into a course. We keep saying that, but we're going to do it this time. We got to get that stuff done.
Definitely.
That's one of the advantages of AI. So anyway, we think that these talks are really good. They're good for the world. They're good for everybody. We don't get nearly enough audience. You guys are amazing, all of you that come. Tell your friends about us. This stuff's free. We don't charge for this. You can watch the replays for the most part for free or very little cost. It's $10 a month to be what's called a pro member of EAT, and you get what, Mark? We're probably getting close to 10,000 hours worth of information.
Yeah, easy.
We're in the high, above 5,000, between 5 and 10,000 at least hours.
Yep, and some of them are world class.
Yes. We had one person, didn't we? The guy from Jamaica that joined for 1 month for $10. Yes. And I think he must have worked 24 hours a day just recording and copying material that we had. And that's fine. That's what we wanted to do. Yes. So we want this to be known around the world and such. So let's be economic. Let's do something to make a little money making the planet better. So anyway, still getting some learned something actually because I'm using Zoom and a whole bunch of other sessions. Our chat roll, Mark publishes it every week. So the chat roll you can read, but if you're watching on Zoom, I think you get chat rolls. Anybody that's watching on Zoom will actually get, when you're done, it'll come in. It's a really tiny little file, and it'll have the whole chat roll on it, I believe. I think anybody that's a Zoom participant gets that. I didn't know that because I've usually been an organizer or involved as a speaker or whatever, and I use Zoom for private conversations and such. But just check that out. I'm not sure about that, but somebody told me that anybody, if you want, you might have to change a setting on your Zoom account, but I think you can get it to where when the session that you've been in is over, even if you didn't record it, we record all of them. but that you can get the chat roll just without doing anything other than telling in advance that you want the chat roll, and then it'll be put right into your whatever you store things on your computer. And it's tiny. It's like 2 or 3, bytes even. It's like less than 20 bytes. It takes up very little space. But you get
Yeah.
the whole roll. We publish it so you can get it from us. But
And Ronald is in the audience, so he's going to be a guest soon.
yeah, Ronald's going to be a guest speaker. Thank you, Ronald, for being here today. And I owe getting back to Paresh. Paresh, I hope you're seeing it. I just don't have enough hours in the week, and there's not enough of me. There need to be hundreds of people that have thoughts similar to mine, and they're not out there. Because all they want to do is just charge people a whole bunch of money to make so much money. So, and that's not what we do. Anyway, thanks everybody. Love it. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk later. It is time for us to say